Hello Year 6 and welcome to my new online book talk sessions. Over the next few weeks we're going to be reading the rest of Eagle in the Snow, which we started at school at the end of last term, and we're going to be doing some book talk sessions using the Reading Rainbow. Let us recap to start off with. I've got some questions here about what has happened in the story so far. So who are the main characters? Do you remember there was Barney and his mother, and the stranger on the train, and the stranger on the train talks about Billy and his wife Christine. What year are they in? Do you remember they're in 1940, just towards the beginning of the Second World War. What has happened to Barney and his mother? Do you remember that at the start of the story their home was destroyed by bombing and they are having to leave and go somewhere else? Do you remember where they're going? They're going on a train journey to a different part of the country to find somewhere else to stay. And who do they meet on the train? Do you remember they're sharing a compartment on the train with a man who's just known as the stranger on the train? And he's got a box of matches, which he keeps lighting matches to give some light, which reassures Barney when he's scared of the dark. And do you remember they're in the tunnel at the moment, taking shelter from the German aircraft. And what are our predictions for this final part of the story? So we've got the two plot lines. We've got the story on the train. What do you think is going to happen with that? And the story the stranger's telling of Billy. What do you think happens to Billy? Okay, before we start today's book talk session, I've got some quiz questions here based on chapter 3. You might want to pause the video and get yourself a pencil and paper so you can write your answers down. So question 1. What did Hitler do which Billy recognised? Question 2. How many years had Christine been with Billy? Question 3. What did Christine do to reassure Billy? And question 4. What rank had Hitler been in the army? If you need longer, remember you can just pause the video. Okay, let's go through the answers. So the answer to the first one, he pushed his hair back with the flat of his hand. Do you remember at the Battle of Marcoing when he was facing Hitler and he didn't know who he was then, but he recognised that action? Question 2. Over 10 years Christine had been with Billy. Question 3. What did Christine do to reassure Billy? Well, she tried to persuade Billy that it wasn't his fault. And question 4. What rank had Hitler been in the army? He'd been a corporal. How did you do with those? Well done. Okay, I'm now going to share with you our interactive rainbow. And our first reason for reading today, we're going to be looking at the Fantastics tier, and we're going to take the lens of feeling. So while I'm going to read the next part of the text to you and to share it on the screen with you, I want you to be thinking about the characters and the feelings that Michael Morpurgo is portraying with them. And you might choose to focus on Billy, or you might choose to focus on Ma and Barney and how they're feeling. And how is the author wanting us to feel and to gauge their feelings? And then we'll come back to this after I've read and we'll pick a sentence starter. So, Eagle in the Snow, part 4. And you might find I have to move around my window just so I don't get in the way of the text. On the way back home from the library, book in hand, Billy passed the newspaper stand outside the station. The newspaper boy was shouting out the headlines. Hitler marches into Austria. Hitler invades Austria. Billy stood there in the street, knowing for sure now that he was responsible for this, and for whatever Adolf Hitler had done or might do in the future. He could have stopped him 20 years before at the Battle of Marcoing, and he hadn't. He knew, as many others did too by now, that sooner or later Hitler would turn his attention to Britain, that it was only a matter of time. And he was right enough there, wasn't he? Ma spoke suddenly, interrupting him out of the darkness. I thought she'd been asleep again, but I was wrong. I mean, just think of it, she went on. If that friend of yours, that Billy Byron was his name, right? If he had pulled his trigger that day, then maybe we wouldn't be at war now, and Barney's dad wouldn't be fighting in the desert, and Dunkirk wouldn't have happened, nor the Blitz in London or Coventry. All those people dead, it's all down to him, to lousy bleeding Adolf. We'd still have our home. Grandpa would still have his beloved horse, his big black Jack. One bullet. That's all it would have taken. One bullet, and none of this would have happened, would it? This story, I hope you don't mind me asking, don't want to be rude or nothing, but you sure it's true? Don't sound very likely if you ask me. You couldn't strike another match, could you? I can't seem to find my knitting needle. She was fumbling around on the seat beside me looking for it. When is this train going to move? She said. I could hear the matchbox opening. The stranger was trying to light one, but it just sparked and died. No good. Must have got damp, he said. Usually reliable these matches are. Not to worry. But I was worried. Here goes. He struck it again, and to my great relief the match flared and lit up. Ma found her knitting needle, almost at once. It had slipped down in between the seats. I relished every moment that match lasted, and dreaded it going out. One more match left. I needed the story to stop me thinking about that. The match was already burning down fast. And you can see I've just highlighted that first part of the paragraph there. And I want you to take a moment and think of that verb relish, to relish something. Do you know what that means? Yeah, that's it. Like, really enjoy it and don't want it to end. And he wanted that light to carry on. Is it true, really true, all of it? I asked him. What happened? What happened next? All true enough, son. Wish it wasn't, said the stranger quietly. It was like a curse on Billy's life, hung heavy over him every moment of every day after that. He never told anyone else about it, except Christine. Everyone, all his friends at work, knew he wasn't quite himself, could tell that he was sad deep inside, that he had troubles. They knew he'd been in the war, of course, and what he'd done, the things he must have seen. Some of them, most of them, had been there too, seen the same things. They only wanted to forget. And as you can see, I've highlighted a bit there. I want you to think about that curse on Billy's life. And the fact Michael Morpurgo said it hung heavy on him, it's a bit like a metaphorical expression, isn't it? Meaning he's just carrying it around with him all the time. Right, I'd like us to stop there and to go back to our Reading Rainbow. And our first reason to read is feeling. So, our sentence starter for today says the author draws attention to. I want you to choose something in the text, what we've just read, where the author is making us notice a particular feeling from a character. Can you use that sentence starter for 1 point? Can you answer it for another point? I wonder if you could go back in the video to the text and try and find a quote that supports your answer, just like we do in class. Remember, you can use quotation marks, just like in the box there, for another point. And then for the fourth bonus point, can you use our word apparent? Can you get that into your sentence? Remember, to say something is apparent, you might use a synonym, it is clear that. So you might want to pause the video now, write down your answer, and this will be your first sentence. Then the end of our book talk session, when we've done this 3 times, you'll be able to photograph them and upload them to Dojo so I can see all your great sentences. Okay, hopefully you paused that and you had a chance to write it down. Let's go back to our reading rainbow. So our second reason to read, we're going to focus on impact. What is the impact? What impression does it have on us of the next part I'm going to read from Michael Morpurgo's book? He shook the match out. We were deep in darkness again, a darkness that was blacker than ever. But I made up my mind then that I mustn't worry about it. Just listen to the story, lose myself in it. Billy's pals in the factory, they understood, the stranger went on. Well, they thought they did. Like Christine, they did their best to cheer him up. But mostly they just left him be. They knew it was best. He went off every morning to the car factory, as he had always done, did his job, and came back home to Christine in the evenings. But all the time the thought of what he'd done, or rather not done, never left his mind, not for a moment. He didn't speak any more about it, not even at home now, but kept it to himself, locked inside, as week by week, month by month, the news in Europe got worse. What would Hitler do next? Where else was he going to invade? When would it be our turn? It was all anyone talked about these days. Everyone noticed the change in Billy. He seemed to live in a world of his own, distant from his workmates and friends, and distant too now even from Christine. Unable any more to joke about his glum time as he had before. They stopped going to the pictures, hardly ever went out. He even stopped his drawing, never got out his sketchbooks, not once, which Christine knew was the worst sign of all. He loved to draw, but not any more. For Billy, every day now was glum time, and he never seemed to be able to lift himself out of it. And I've highlighted that phrase, glum time. Can you think of another way of saying that? Like maybe if he's sad or depressed or in a bad mood. Christine never stopped trying. She just hoped that one day he would be able to leave his sadness behind and be the man she had once known again. The man she loved, the man she knew was still there inside there, who had saved her life when she was little, and who she knew had only done what he thought was the right thing and was now suffering for it. So I want to stop us there, go back to our reading rainbow, and we're going to focus on this impact. And we're going to use that sentence starter. The writer's intended impact at this point. What is Michael Morpurgo? What kind of impact, impression does he want us to have from this bit I've read? Can you use that for one point? Can you answer it? For another point, can you make sure you've got some evidence from the text, please? And our bonus word for that fourth point is selected. Maybe you want to talk about the selected vocabulary when choosing something to help justify your thoughts. So if you write that down, that will be your second sentence today for our book talk session. Pause the video and then we'll enter the final part of today's session. Okay, let's go back to our reading rainbow. And our final point today on the analytics level is your personal opinion. And that's quite a nice one, getting you to explain what you think about the text and the way Michael Morpurgo's written it. So we'll go back to our writing. And then in September 1938 it was, a couple of years ago now, it seems like yesterday, Mr. Chamberlain, the Prime Minister then, goes off to see Mr. Hitler up in his mountain home, the Berghof they call it, at a place called Berchtesgaden in the Bavarian Alps, and does his best to do a deal with him. You remember that? Well, as we all know now, and we should have known it all at the time, you can't hardly do a deal with the devil, can you? So our Mr. Chamberlain comes back a few days later, smiling all over his face and waving his piece of paper, telling the world that everything was going to be just tickety-boo, and that he'd sorted everything out with Mr. Hitler, and that we'd all have peace in our time. Some peace we've had, right? We all wanted to believe it, of course we did, but most of us didn't, and Billy Byron certainly didn't. And I want you to have a look at those bits I've highlighted about telling the world everything was going to be tickety-boo. We don't use that phrase a lot now, but it's more spoken than written. Do you know what it means? Yeah, it means that everything was going to be all right. It's quite a nice hyphenated word to use. And then the other bit, peace in our times. Do you know why that's in inverted commas? Yeah, that's it, because it's taken from a famous speech from Chamberlain. Well, I never believed that, Mr. Chamberlain, neither, said Mum vociferously. And what's more, nor did Barney's dad nor his grandpa. If you ask me, he was soft in the head believing Hitler like that, like he did. But Grandpa always says you can't go blaming Chamberlain any more than you can blame the poor old hen when the wicked old fox comes a-skulking around the hen house. Only way you can look after the hens is to keep out the fox, or better still, go after him and kill him. And that's what we've got to do. That's what Barney's dad's doing right now. He's going after him. We'll soon sort out that foxy Mr. Hitler, won't we, Barney? I'm going to leave the reading there. So just for the final time, let's go back to our rainbow. And our personal opinion. And I'd like us to use this sentence starter to answer. We have found it easy or difficult to relate to this book because. So I'd like you to use that sentence starter and choose if you want easy or difficult. Do you think it's easy to relate to make those connections to because we've been studying about World War II? Or it might be a topic you're particularly interested in? Or do you think it's difficult because we can't imagine, we can't appreciate how people would have felt because we weren't alive during that period? You decide how you want to answer it, but 1 point for using it, 2 points for answering it, an extra point for finding evidence from the text, maybe which supports if you found it easy or difficult. And our bonus word is emphasis. Is there a particular emphasis that Michael Morpurgo puts on a particular action that makes it easy or difficult to relate to? It's quite hard, that one, but have a go. And this will be your third sentence for this session. And then I'd really like to see those 3 sentences being uploaded to our Year 6 area on Dojo at some point this week. And if you come back on Thursday and look on the timetable, there'll be another book talk session and we'll carry on with the rest of the story then. Okay, well done Year 6 and see you again soon.